In 736 BC, the Assyrian Empire expanded across the Levant, casting an existential shadow over the region's smaller kingdoms. To resist this expansion, Syria and Israel formed a desperate military coalition. This alliance initiated the conflict known as the Syro-Ephraimite War. King Ahaz of Judah refused to join this anti-Assyrian bloc. This decision turned his territory into a primary target for his immediate neighbors. Isaiah chapter 7, verse 1 records the escalation. Rezin, the king of Syria, and Pekah, the king of Israel, marched their combined armies toward Jerusalem to wage war against it. Rezin and Pekah launched a retaliatory two-front siege against Jerusalem, attempting to force Judah into their alliance. Despite this coordinated show of force, the historical record indicates the coalition was structurally unable to breach Jerusalem's core defenses. While the physical walls of the city held, Ahaz faced a different kind of danger: the terrifying reality of complete geopolitical isolation. Inside the royal court, the atmosphere was one of frantic psychological distress among the king and his leadership. Verse 2 details the intelligence received by the house of David, reporting that Syria had successfully confederated with Ephraim. The text describes a state of absolute panic, noting that the hearts of the people shook as the trees of the wood are moved with the wind. This map illustrates the source of that panic. Ahaz was facing a coordinated two-front war against unified regional powers. The success of this coalition would mean more than a military loss. It would terminate the Davidic line and end Judah's status as a sovereign nation. Paralyzed by these immediate threats, Ahaz allowed the panic of the moment to eclipse his strategic judgment and historical perspective. We find Ahaz at the conduit of the upper pool, where he was desperately inspecting the city's water supply in preparation for a long siege. In verse 3, God commands the prophet Isaiah to intercept the king at this specific, vulnerable location. Isaiah was instructed to bring his young son to the meeting, a detail that served a specific pedagogical function. The child's name, Shir Yashub, carries a heavy theological meaning: a remnant shall return. This child acted as a living prophetic sign, a tangible, walking pledge that Judah would ultimately survive the coming conflict. Verse 4 records Isaiah's direct command for Ahaz to remain calm, quiet, and fearless. Isaiah dismantled the psychological threat by labeling the enemy kings as nothing more than two tails of smoking firebrands. He reframed Rezin and Pekah as burnt-out twigs, men who had already exhausted their combustible power and posed no lasting danger. Isaiah's presence and rhetoric redefined the crisis, shifting it from a military catastrophe into a test of spiritual reliance. Beyond the military posturing in the enemy camps, Syria and Israel were driven by a hidden motive. Verses 5 and 6 reveal the evil counsel plotted by the coalition. The coalition aimed for a result more permanent than border skirmishes: the total replacement of the Judean government. The conspirators intended to depose the Davidic line and install a puppet king known as the son of Tabial. This move would have effectively hijacked Judah's sovereignty, forcing the nation to join the anti-Assyrian bloc against its own interests. In verse 7, Isaiah delivered a definitive theological countermand to this political plot. "Thus saith the Lord God, it shall not stand, neither shall it come to pass." By identifying the specific participants and their chosen puppet, Isaiah stripped the threat of its mystery, presenting it as a tactical conspiracy destined for failure. This structural redefinition moved the conflict from the realm of existential terror to a manageable, if temporary, political crisis. To address the king's fear, Isaiah presented a macroscopic view of the regional future. Verse 8 provides a terminal forecast for Syria and a specific 65-year countdown for the destruction of Ephraim. Isaiah points out that Rezin is merely the head of Damascus. As this photograph of the ancient city walls suggests, his power is strictly confined to his own borders and is ultimately finite. This mathematical timeline begins at the current crisis of 736 BC and traces forward exactly 65 years to 671 BC. History confirms the accuracy of this forecast. By 671 BC, the Assyrian king Assurbanipal completed the total deportation and repopulation of Samaria. This Assyrian decree ensured Ephraim would be utterly broken. ceasing to exist as a distinct people. The enemies Ahaz feared in the present were already living on borrowed time, destined for erasure by a much larger empire. Back at the conduit of the upper pool, the focus returned to the psychological choice laid before King Ahaz. Verse 9 delivers a final warning regarding Samaria's fragility and the absolute necessity of belief. Remaliah's son, like these weathered ruins, was destined to fail. Isaiah presented this ultimatum: "If ye will not believe, surely ye shall not be established." Judah faced two divergent paths: yielding to the terror of failing regional powers, or trusting in the long-term sovereignty of history. Choosing fear and pursuing desperate political compromises would eventually cost Ahaz the stability he sought. True establishment requires looking past the paralyzing panic of the immediate moment to recognize the broader timeline that dictates the rise and fall of nations.